Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. In today's video, I wanted to do a get ready with me using a lot of products that I've hauled over the past several months, and I've developed my updated reviews and impressions of these. So hopefully this is helpful for any of you guys who are curious about these products, saw my first impressions, and want to know how they've stood the test of time. So let's start out with this Lisa Eldridge Elevated Glow Highlighter. This is in the shade Cosmic Rose. And I picked this up kind of on a whim. I'm actually normally not a liquid highlighter type of person. It's not really a step I typically go for. But if you guys watched my initial video with this, basically I was on the Lisa Eldridge website and this just looked so beautiful. I decided to pick it up and give it a shot. I will say that since then, I've used this on occasion. It is a really beautiful product. As you can see, it gives a really nice, healthy glow to the skin. It's not metallic or blinding at all. You can use it on its own, like I just did on this half of my face, or you can layer it with foundation, which is typically the way I use it. I will say though, with this product, I do find it sort of hit or miss in terms of how well it layers. So for example, I've tried this a few times with my Surratt foundation, and sometimes that has not gone super well. I think sometimes when I add additional products on top of this, it sort of picks up the layers in an unflattering way. This does pair really nicely though with Lisa Eldridge's foundation, which, you know, makes sense, it's in the same line. But if you do have that foundation and you wanted something a bit more glowy and luminous, then I think this is really gorgeous. For me personally though, I would say it's a like, not a love. It's a little bit finicky, more finicky I would say than my Charlotte Tilbury Hollywood Flawless Filter. But if you want a more natural, kind of serum-y, dewy version of that, then I think this is a good one to try out. So normally I would go in next with foundation, but I'm actually going to first go in with this Surratt concealer. I have this in shade 3, which is a bit light for me, and so I find that it's helpful to actually layer my foundation on top of this. It's a pretty thick formula, as you can see. It has that sponge tip applicator, which is not my favorite, but this does have really remarkable coverage, especially for a luxury formulation. Now, if you guys watched my Met Gala look video where I also use this foundation, you know that I have sort of mixed feelings about it. I like that it's very high coverage and lightweight and doesn't need to be set, but I find that it often doesn't pair well with other products. It can sort of get really dry if I powder it, and then sometimes it tends to lift when paired with other complexion products. So I just find it a little bit finicky to use, especially at the price point. It's not a concealer I would recommend to run out and get, but it does look really nice when you get it to work. So right now I think it looks pretty nice, for example, without any powder on, especially in the under eye area for brightening. In hindsight, I think I probably should have gotten a deeper shade than 3, but it is really good for brightening the under eye area. But next up for foundation, we have the Kogan Do Moisture Foundation, which I have in shade 123. I absolutely love this. This has quickly risen to be one of my favorite foundations. It's a beautiful creamy formula. It basically feels like moisturizer on the skin, so you can actually put this on with a finger application and it goes on really nicely. Today I'm going to use a sponge, but I also like it with a brush. It's super easy to blend in because it has that moisturizer consistency, and the shade 123 is perfect for me. I also featured this in a recent video if you want a more in-depth review. I compared this with the Aqua foundation, which is also one of my favorite foundations of all time. So Kogan Do really, for me, hits it out of the park when it comes to complexion products. But this one is just a little bit more moisturizing, a little bit more natural on the skin. The Aqua foundation is more like a full glam sort of filtered effect, whereas this just kind of looks like your skin but better. So you can see with just a pretty thin layer all over the face, it sort of looks like I don't have anything on my face, just that my skin is a little bit more perfected. For today's look though, I am going to go in with a second layer just because we are doing a full beat, but I'm not going to add too much more, just a thin second layer. The only thing I don't like about this foundation is the packaging is kind of cheap looking considering the price, and you don't get a ton of product, but this is definitely one of my all-time favorite formulas on the market, so I definitely recommend the formula very, very highly. Alright, so here we have foundation and concealer done. Now to set everything, I'm going to go in with this M Cosmetics Portrait Mode Refining Setting Powder in the shade Sheer, which is their translucent setting powder. This is another product that's kind of in that like not love category. I'm going to use my Classic Face from Sonia G to set this. I'm going to first just set half of my face so you guys can see. I would say this works very well. It does what it's supposed to in terms of setting the face. It's not the most exceptional powder in terms of having any additional properties though. It's not as blurring as my Huda Beauty powder, and it's not as natural looking as my Kogan Do loose powder. So here we have it on this side of my face, and this side is unset. You can definitely see how this very quickly mattified my face. But I do find with this product, if I use it with a drier complexion product, then this can start looking a little bit cakey. So today with the moisture foundation, I think it's fine, at least for now. But did just want to mention that if you are someone who struggles with dry patches, this is not necessarily going to be the best powder for counteracting that. In general though, I would say I haven't found any pressed setting powders that I absolutely love. My all-time favorite at the moment is probably the Pat McGrath Under Eye Setting Powder. I use that one all over the face. I find that using it sparingly, it looks really good. But in general, I do prefer my loose setting powders. I find that they just perform a lot better in terms of being more natural looking and also blurring and refining the appearance of my skin. So if you are on the market for a pressed powder, I think this one is pretty good as far as pressed powders go, but nothing revolutionary. Moving right along, for the brows, I have this Kogan Do brow pencil in the shade Brown. And this is one that is all right, I would say. One thing that I don't love about this brow pencil is it does not come with a spoolie brush, which personally I find kind of inconvenient because I always need to brush out my brows with a spoolie. I do like how thin this brow pencil is, so it does create some nice hair-like strokes. The texture is also pretty good. It's not too stiff such that it would break like the Huda Beauty one, and it's not too creamy that it's hard to create fine strokes. It is overall a good sort of middle of the road brow pencil, but I just wish that I had a spoolie, and I also wish this shade was just a little bit more cool toned. I bought this when I was in Japan and the store didn't have all the shades in stock, so I picked up this shade Brown, and I think they might have a cooler tone shade somewhere. But yeah, I find this to just be a little bit more reddish than I would love, but overall a pretty solid product. Now I'm going to just put on some of my ABH eye primer. This is one of my all-time, probably my all-time favorite eye primer. So this is not a new product, but one that I would highly recommend, especially if you're someone who at all struggles with blendability of your eyeshadows. For me, I find that most eye primers are really good at helping shimmers to adhere to the lids, but make mattes harder to blend out. Not with this one though. It is really easy to blend out your mattes very seamlessly on top of this. So I brought you guys closer for the eyeshadow portion. I'll be using these brushes for today's look. These four over here are her Tradition Select series, so really special hairs. And then this one over here is the T6 from the Tradition set in the Kakishibu dye. And the palette for today is this one from Lunasol. I demoed this when I first hauled it in my Japan haul, but I don't think I've showed it to you guys since then. So I wanted to do a look showcasing this. It's a really beautiful palette. So first with the T6, I'm going into this shade over here. I really enjoy using the T6 just for these sorts of all over transition shades. It's really good at very quickly laying down pigment in a nice diffused way. Very luxurious brush. This is obviously not going to give you very targeted placement, but it's extremely soft on the eyes, and especially for a shade like this that is pretty close to my skin tone anyway, I find that this is the perfect brush to leave a really nice, even application. So yeah, this shade is not going to add much if you have a skin tone like myself, but this is good if you want something just very natural to kind of even out the skin tone, add a little bit of that satin effect. Next, with the TS3 brush, I'm going into the deepest shade in this palette. And this is a very uniquely shaped brush. It's sort of like a hybrid between a crease brush and a pencil brush. And so I usually like using this to add an outer corner deepening shade. As you can see, it allows you to kind of keep the pigment concentrated closer to the lash line, but also to diffuse it into the crease. And you can also sort of pull out the pigment a bit if you want to do kind of a more wispy winged effect. And then going in with the TS2 brush, I'm going to take this green shade, this sort of minty shade over here, and sweep this all over the lid. So this formula is kind of interesting in that it's much more of a glitter topper than a full pigment shade. So as you can see, it's not going to leave a lot of color on the lids. I have sort of a mixed relationship with this palette where I find it really beautiful and very easy to use, but I just wish that I had one shimmer that wasn't in this highly glittery formula. Like, don't get me wrong, this formula is very gorgeous and quite unique for what would otherwise be a very muted palette, but I kind of wish one of these two was more of a full pigment shimmer. That way you could put that all over the lid and then just top it with the other shade. Instead, we have both of these shades giving this sort of very ethereal effect. And so it's sort of this unique combination of very natural in terms of the tones, especially these two shades are super natural, but then you also have these like really shimmery, glittery topper shades. So now just to kind of finish off the look, I'm going back in with that TS3 brush and just deepening things a bit in the outer portion, and also taking that a bit in the crease area just to add a little bit more depth. Now there is fallout from that highly glittery shimmery shade, which is to be expected given how shiny it is, but just something I wanted to note if you have sensitive eyes and you don't want shimmery particles to be flying around. And this does apply a little bit better with a finger, but I find the TS2 is a pretty solid brush if you want a slightly more diffused application. Now with the TS4, which is a smaller pencil brush, I'm going into the lighter shade and putting that in the inner portion of the eyes. So you can see that that's quite glittery. Again, it's sort of a unique combination, this palette, of very glittery toppers and then these extremely subtle satin shades. For the lower lash line, I'm going in with the TS1, and I'm just going to go straight into the deeper shade because the other one doesn't show up a ton. And I'm just going to run this along the lower lash line. This is a super soft, very comfortable brush for the lower lash line area. And in general, I've just been really loving this Tradition Select series. It's very fun to use, very luxurious, feels great on the eyes. And especially for looks like this where you're not trying to do anything extremely precise and you just want something that's a little bit more blurred out, then I think this set is really great for that. Now just to add a little bit of the sparkle, I'm going to take some of this as well and place this on the lower lash line. So there we go. Very kind of interesting look that is on the one hand very softly smoky, but on the other hand does kind of pack a punch. So now just to finish off the eyeshadow, I still want to have a little bit more impact. So I'm actually going to go in with a finger to this shade just to really top things off. Like I said, the one thing I'm not a huge fan of with this palette is I feel like getting any sort of color is kind of difficult. You can definitely see the shine from these glittery toppers, but I really liked the kind of greenish shade in here, and I feel like I need to really build it up to get that color to show up on my lids. In general, I think if I were to buy another palette from Lunasol, I would look for one that has one topper shade, two of these mattes, and then some other shimmer shade. I also do think if you got a palette just with the mattes, that would be really nice too, because these are some of the easiest to use mattes that I've ever tried, especially if you're not looking for high pigmentation, more of a natural look. I think that this formulation is really beautiful. Alrighty, so here we have the finished eyeshadow look. And here's the eyeshadow look with eyeliner. So zooming out, let's go in with the rest of the look now. So for bronzer today, I have the Terra bronzer from Tom Ford. This is a product that it took me a long time to pick up. I feel like I've been hearing rave reviews about this for the longest time, and I've been really loving this ever since picking it up. So I'm going to go in with my F04 brush from Chikuhodo to apply it today. And what I really love about this product is the tone of this bronzer. It reminds me a lot of Nude Honey from Pat McGrath, which is also one of my favorite bronzer formulas. It's that perfect neutral bronze that's not too cool toned, so you can still use it as a bronzer as well. And also this formula is just very easy to use. It glides onto the skin really nicely. It has a good level of pigmentation, so you can build it, but it's also not too overwhelming upon initial application. And it has a nice peachiness that I feel like is quite flattering. It's a little bit more peachy than the Pat McGrath. And it's matte, but not a super flat matte either. So here you can see it on this side of my face, just providing a bit more dimension compared to this side of my face. Now, the one thing I don't like about this is I feel like the compact gets really dirty because it's actually not that big for a bronzer. For some reason, I thought this was going to be more like the size and shape of the OG Marc Jacobs bronzer, if you guys remember that one. That was also one of my favorites, and it has a similar sort of white packaging, very similar shape as well, but that one is huge compared to this one. This looks more like a blush in terms of the compact size, and so I do find that when I swirl my brush in it, it does get a little bit messy around here. And I've noticed this with other content creators as well who have used this, so I think it's not just me being messy, but just the size of this compact. But as you can see, I'm kind of applying this pretty generously. I find that it's very easy to use. I don't have to be too precious with it, which I like on an everyday basis, not having to worry too much about how much bronzer I'm applying. It's sort of hard to apply too much of this. Next up for blush, I have the Mini Dream Blush from Natasha Denona. This is a combination blush highlighter. In practice though, I just kind of swirl everything together because this is a very small compact. You can focus just on the blush if you want, but personally I do like a slightly shimmery blush, so I just kind of use both sides at the same time. And I've been really liking this blush. I think this is a perfect everyday blush. As you can see, it's not actually that shimmery on the cheeks, even if you swirl everything together. It's a really pretty rosy nude shade, very nice and natural for pretty much any look. I think for travel, this is especially good because it's super, super tiny and compact, but this sort of shade goes with any look, basically. So there, you can see just how nice and natural that looks. And having the highlighter part too just means you can make it as shimmery as you'd like, which I think is kind of cool as well. But I was worried it would be a little bit too intense for like a professional makeup look, but I actually think it looks really good even for the office if you just don't go as heavy-handedly on the shimmery side. The only thing I don't 100% love about this is I will say that if you have kind of a yellow undertone like myself, in certain lighting this kind of rosy neutral shade can look a little bit gray, but for the most part it looks really beautiful. Now finishing off this look, I'm going in with Wild Begonia from Chantecaille. This is in the Lip Veil formula. I have this in the limited edition Wild Mustangs packaging. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that on. You can see that it's a nice cool toned pinky shade. Good level of pigmentation with one swipe, even though this is kind of a sheer formula. Now, I did release a video with all of my Chantecaille lip products talking about some of the formulation differences between lip veils and lip cheeks. So if you want more of an in-depth dive with a lot of swatches, definitely check out that video. But just to summarize for this particular lipstick, I would say that I've really been enjoying it. You can see that it is a beautiful level of opacity with just a couple swipes. It's very comfortable, especially upon initial application. And it leaves a really nice finish. It's not super juicy, it's also not matte, so just a really nice satin finish. The only thing I don't totally love about this formula is on an everyday basis, I'm more likely to go in with the lip cheeks, which are the much more hydrating versions. My lips are super dry, and so typically I do prefer an extra hydrating lipstick. This one is very hydrating for a satin lipstick, but not as hydrating as the lip cheeks. So as a result, I haven't gotten as much use out of this formula. But if you want a lighter weight, non-sticky hydrating lipstick formula, this one is really great. So here we have the final makeup look. What do you guys think? Overall, I've really been enjoying all of these products. Like I said, some of these are not ones that I would consider my holy grail products, but none of these were duds, and some I've really loved. Like the Moisture Foundation, highly recommend this. This bronzer is really exceptional, especially if you have a skin tone similar to myself and you want something that's just really not fussy, kind of neutral, but still bronzy. This blush is gorgeous for everyday occasions. And I absolutely love these Sonia G brushes. So that's it for today's video. I would love to hear in the comments what you guys think about these sorts of get ready with me types of videos where I just go through some products that I've been testing for a while and give you guys my updated impressions. Let me know if you like this format or if there's a different format you would prefer for these makeup updates. I'd also love to hear if any of you guys have tried these formulas, and if so, what your thoughts are. And if you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you all so much for joining me today, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!